in the Futurist Manifesto, they were like, by the time I think it was we reached 35, like, throw us to the fucking dogs. You know, this shit is awesome. I'm excited to see what you guys read and what you think about futurism, and if you're going to be one of the people that are like, futurists are fascists.
Yeah, I'll let you know when I get there.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, it's I'm taking this class called The Commons.
Okay.
And taking a class about it's about like science and ecology.
Yeah.
But from a I think it's like feminist and post-colonial perspective. You know, like Donna Haraway. She wrote Cyborg Manifesto. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like that kind of literature.
Okay.
So
okay.
That'll be interesting.
I remember in one of my it was one of the classes from last semester. We were looking at like a different like virtual artwork thing, and the lady that did the project was like citing the Donna Haraway thing. So it would be interesting to like read that again, because I remember I was supposed to read it before for another class, and I think I touched it and I was like, yeah, okay. And it was just like not what the fuck I was interested in that moment, you know? So like I wasn't trying to do it. Plus that class was like fucking crazy, and like it was a class, like it was a sci-fi art class.
Yeah.
And it's funny because the two people are married, right? Like, so the dude that like I took the sci-fi art class with, like his wife taught the contemporary art class, which is where I encountered the Donna Haraway thing again, right? But they both like using fucking Slack instead of using like Blackboard or some shit like that. And it's just like I feel like it feels so unorganized, and like every class that used Slack, I just fucking despised it. Even when the classes were cool, it's like I fucking disliked it so much. Holy shit, it sucked. But the classes were cool.
When I teach a class, I'm gonna make all my students use Discord.
That's probably yeah.
Yeah, when they email me, they have to email me through Signal. And pay their tuition through Bitcoin for Ethereum.
Dogecoin. Are you do you get to teach yet, or like how long until you get to teach?
I could teach. I mean, I could apply for a teaching position now.
Okay.
They would probably tell me it's a bit premature.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I were to teach, it would probably be during my third year. I'm still not sure if I will. They make it optional for us, like they pay us to do it rather than being part of our contract, which is pretty sick. But yeah, I think I might do it just for the experience.
Do you get to put together like the syllabus and the readings and all? Like, do you get to basically like choose the topic for the class, or will it be like a undergrad thing and you kind of have to stick on a course?
Yeah, so it's like you can if you do it during the school year, you're a TA for a faculty member.
Okay.
But if you do it during the summer, then you can, I think, teach and design your own course.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I would just like every week would just be like, I don't know, some Unabomber essay.
So, I guess for like this week and this reading, is this anyway like associated with the Unabomber, what we read today? I guess let's fucking introduce it. So it's by Bob Black, and it's the Abolition of Work.
Yeah. Dude, I'm hyped I got to read this.
Yeah.
Because I've encountered it multiple times, and I've like skimmed the first page, and I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting. But I never actually got to sit down and read it. But I'm glad I did. It's a pretty good piece.
It's fucking funny.
Yeah. Yeah, like we were saying before too, it's like you can tell he knows what he's talking about. He's not just name dropping, right?
Yeah.
It's like he's like talking about these different like writers, intellectual traditions, and ones that even I'm familiar with, so I can tell like, oh, he knows what he's talking about based on the way that he's talking about it. But he's not like showing off. He writes in a super accessible and even funny, like, and witty way.
Yeah, it's like it's so straightforward and like attainable, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
The only thing that like I was a little like what the fuck was like, around the first paragraph, he uses a couple terms, but I'm like, I have no idea what the fuck you're talking about. Like fucking ludic something something, and then like a couple more terms he used. But then like I looked them up and I was like, okay, I got you, fam. Let's do this.
Does ludic have anything to do with Luddite, or are they different words?
I have no fucking idea. I just know he was talking about playfulness and like a communal playfulness.
Right.
I got the idea that he was looking at something kind of communal-ish, but like in a way it is like individual.
Yeah.
You know?
For sure.
But yeah, this was interesting. It says it was from 2009.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and like he has a couple different books and stuff like that, and like this is it included in a book of like multiple essays, and some of the titles for the other essays seem like really cool, and I want to check them out.
Yeah.
It seems like he's a smart ass.
Yeah, right? I feel like it's a very he gives me these like this like very specific anarchist vibe of like the type of anarchist who like doesn't give a fuck. He's just sick of everybody's shit. Like, I mean, I think he even kind of points to it, his own personal life in the essay, where he's like, I don't want to like pander to a bunch of fuckers to get tenure.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh,
right?
I think he's talking about himself.
He's like, I'd like to teach less hours and not suck up or coercing students.
But he's an interesting figure. I can't say I know too much about him, but he's a post-left anarchist.
What does that mean?
I'm sure any like devout anarchists,
Mm-hmm.
and they're all like super fucking smart and well read.
Okay.
They're gonna think I'm gonna butcher this, but I'll risk it. I think post-leftism, at least from my understanding, it's like this tradition of anarchism that begins with sort of a disillusionment with the sort of folk politics of the left. So it's disillusionment with socialism, with Marxism, with even a lot of forms of anarchism as like viable forms of organizing. Either like they're not the forms of organizing or resistance, they're just seen as like archaic, they're not relevant anymore, or they're just super traditional, or they're just not in tune with the way the world is anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Or like post-left for some of them also means that like these ideologies or these traditions, they don't go far enough in their analysis. So post-left often is implicitly involved with like anti-civilization anarchism or anarcho-primitivism, which you're familiar with. Yeah, because their whole shtick is like against the structure of civilization itself, against agriculture, against states as a phenomenon. And so they don't get along with Marxists and socialists because they're in favor of like a state or in certain types of bureaucratic organizations, but just designed differently.
It is interesting because it's like my like the vision I got while reading this is like him like with a middle finger pointed at everyone with like a smile on his face. Yeah, and he, like what you mentioned, like being disillusioned with stuff, like he says it, like he's like he's basically like fuck all ideologies, and like he didn't even say some, he said like all, and he's like like, they all like in this sense rely on work, and I think there is a point where he does mention like even just like with Marx stuff that like that dude was dealing with a different world. This is like now, yeah, so this was cool to check out just because like at first he's like the fuck everything aspect of it. So it's like, yo, I feel you, man. Where are we going?
It's very anarchist in that sense that you just said, and also in just his like contempt for like every other leftist tradition. It's like oh, left is infighting. Very leftist.
But, like I like it because like some of the shit, like the thing itself is like radical, and then the things he says is just like completely radical, just like, but I like that because it's like, it's something I encounter myself where it's like people, they want to change things or they don't like something, but still they work inside of that realm of the thing where it's like, if you don't like it, fucking like make your exit, man. Like what the fuck are you doing? Like if we're for example, I remember like one teacher mentioned, it's like, okay, you don't like the Jedi, so you go to the dark side, but you're still working in the Force. Or
Yeah.
you don't like going to church, so you get into Satanism, but you're still working with fucking Christianity. You know what I mean? But in
Yeah.
this, he mentioned like he's like, oh, people like talking about like employment discrimination. He's like, no, just fucking end employment. Like,
Yeah.
it's
I
like,
love that.
it's this pure just like, oh, this is the box. I'm just like, I'm not even gonna like bother. Like, I'm over here. Like
Yeah.
that's cool as shit. And I think that's
Right.
the method to take. Like just pure like, oh, that's the thing. Fuck it. Like, I'm over here. I don't need this. I like that a lot. But yeah, no work. The abolition of work.
I think I said this to you before, but it's like this piece, or at least the title,
Mm-hmm.
it's just like something I ruminate on, and it's like it exists on a spectrum of how fed up I am with working.
Yeah.
So sometimes, like when I'm really at the end of my wits, I'm like Bob Black, Abolition of Work level of fed the fuck up with whatever I'm doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's interesting, like to think about what he says about how the all these different intellectual or political traditions, from conservatism to liberals to even leftists, they sort of all collude or agree on the same premise, that, well, almost like assumption that work is this sacred feature of society, or it's just something that it's very like matter of fact. It's like, of course,
Yeah.
you can't have social life, you can't have a functioning society without work, and that isn't even often defined. Like, what do we mean by work? Because I think something like this, like if you just look at this title, it's very like stereotypical. It like captures the stock figure of what people think anarchists are about. It's like, oh, you're just fucking lazy, like you don't want to work.
Yeah.
Right? But then you read it and you're like, actually what he says, it makes a lot of sense.
I think he does that on purpose, though, and that's like the humor in it, And
Yeah.
like he acknowledges the humor when he says that he's like, he said he's joking and being serious,
Yeah.
But like that to me was the most like magical part of the writing, because like when you are writing and doing these things, like you're creating it, right? You're creating something that wasn't there before by writing this. And what he said that he's joking and being serious at the same time. So this is work, like he's making something, right? But he's displaying, he's exercising what he's making by doing this. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
because in
totally.
this he's joking, he's making jokes, he's joking about it, but he's dead fucking serious on what he's doing. And
Right.
it's the exercise of this, not the end product, which is work is like the end product. But that's like, he's against that. But this thing itself is the exercise of actually doing this. Whereas he's showing that it can be done, that joking and seriousness play can be done by fucking doing it. And that's like, it's so fucking crazy. Like, it's all right here. That's so cool.
Yeah, I think it's really cool when authors do shit like that. Like
Yes.
they're like engaging in the sort of method or new way of thinking that they're sort of trafficking in, but like through their writing, because the writing, it is very playful, and I think the concept of play is like one of the central features
Absolutely, yeah.
of the text, which we should talk about before we do. When you mentioned the where he says, he makes a distinction, or he doesn't make the distinction rather, between joking and play, and it's the sentence where he says, like the surrealists, except that I'm not kidding, I favor full unemployment. I don't know anything about the surrealists, so I didn't get that joke. I laughed because I felt like it was funny, but I'm gonna need some elaboration.
Let me see if I can pull this out of my ass. Full unemployment. I guess like the surrealists are still working, and the surrealists, like, he might be taking a hit at their interest in like communism.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but he might just be also like fucking with them, because like they were like doing like playful art kind of and shit, but they were still like became famous.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because like my studies on surrealism is like the key to let me get in and actually like study what I want. You know, it's like when I was putting together the like we're getting off topic really quick, but like when I put together the syllabus to do like a surrealism study, right? The professor knew what I really wanted to study, like fucking weird like psychoanalysis and philosophy things. But he's like, we just need to call this surrealism so we can go ahead and get it approved. You know, so like we started with surrealism and stuff, but it's interesting because like everybody that like the interesting part of surrealism is everyone that got kicked out of surrealism and the people that were involved around it, you know. So yeah, that is a little sidetrack, but I did see that hit in here, but I know this like looking him up, it said that he was influenced by like situationalists and shit like that, and I think that, like going and doing a little quick research, saying like situationalists had like they were influenced by surrealism also. You know, I guess like anything that comes after surrealism is influenced by surrealism. You know, like you kind of once that hit the world, like with futurism, you can't get away from it. It's everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Like,
I'm gonna have to like read a lot more about surrealism and then come back to this paper so I can fully appreciate
right?
the taste of the joke. But that's good writing. Like I laughed and I didn't even know what he was talking about.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, I can sense this is funny.
I guess we'll get to it, but like what was a line that like made you probably laugh like the most out of this?
Oh man, that's hard. One of the passages that stuck out to me that it was when he was sort of describing the modern workplace.
Okay.
And so it's on page 3 when he says, the liberals and the conservatives and libertarians who lament totalitarianism are phonies and hypocrites. There's more freedom in any moderately de-Stalinized dictatorship than there is in the ordinary American workplace. And then I think he calls the modern workplace a, what does he call it? A factory fascism or workplace oligarchy.
It's good.
Yeah, and just the way he describes the workplace, I think it's very resonant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just something. It's such a cool thing to write about because I feel like it's something that everyone can relate to on some level, or I mean, I don't know. Some people have just had like such great jobs all their life, and they've never known what it's like to have like a dickhead boss or like a terrible job, and so maybe they can't relate to it. But like, just this passage, it really made me think of, because I think a lot of people, they would read this and they would say like, you know, that's not true. Like, I have a great job, or like, you know, me and my coworkers and my boss, we're on an equal playing field. Like, we're like family. Right? That's something you hear a lot, like, oh, we're family.
Yeah.
Like, when I was working at Trader Joe's, this is what they told me on the first day. They were like, you know, oh, you know, most corporations, their power structure is like a pyramid, but here, we like to think of it as an upside down pyramid where you guys have the power because we're like family. And I'm like, from that day, I was like, all right, these motherfuckers are going to exploit me.
Yo, but like,
I can tell.
Isn't that like, he kind of like says that in here though, like you're bred from like a child in the family to be in like the realm of accepting like discipline and like taking orders.
Yeah. He says like, if you're waking, or most of our waking life is in work. It's going to work, being at work, coming home from work, which we should also talk about. But most of our waking life is there, and the workplace is super hierarchical and rigid. And so he says, if most of your waking life is in hierarchy, rigidity, like mundaneness, just boring bullshit, you're going to be a boring bullshit, mundane, hierarchical person.
You are what you do. And
right.
It's like, holy shit, dude.
I think that makes a lot of sense. But, no, but yeah, I was thinking like, you know, people would read this and they would say, oh, that's not true. My workplace is like such and such. Mm-hmm. Or, which is, I think is more, you have to contend with more than the boss saying, oh no, we're all family, because it's like, that's just bullshit. You know, they're just spewing whatever. But I think even in those instances where people say like, "Oh, my workplace is not hierarchical, it's great, blah blah blah." It's interesting because I think like no matter where you are, just because of the structure of employment and work, there always is hierarchy. It's just sometimes the hierarchy can go into remission.
Okay.
Meaning like, so there's always a structure or a hierarchy, but the sort of the overt exercises of power, they don't have to come out until one of you steps out of line, someone makes a transgression, and then it's kind of like how a state works. It's like things can be like it can appear that like your relationship, your contract with each other is voluntary until there's a breach, and then the soldiers come out, and then like the true colors are revealed and everything.
So like when you mention this, it makes me think like, so people that would say like they like that they don't experience, that they don't have a bad work experience, it could be because they have the sense of play where they're working, and in that sense it's kind of okay. Yeah. And I think that what he hit on is like having a sense that like you're exercising a skill, and then also like having a hand in creation,
Yeah.
So I think that's an important aspect, and in that sense it's
for
okay.
Sure.
Like then it does, like it's like bringing the playful into things, you know what I mean? Yeah, that's where I'm getting at with that.
Right, because it's like, how can you? But the problem is like, is the whether it's voluntary or not, and it's like how can you engage in creativity with something that's compulsory or 40 hours a week? Well, I mean, a lot of people do that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they work even more.
Yeah, I feel like when you get to the point, like, I mean, say even like doing your own work, like you work more.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like, right. I mean, I spend who knows how much fucking time, like on my academic work. I mean, I'm very brainwashed or like socialized, and because at the end of the day, it's work. Like it's my labor.
It is.
But like I'll happily spend like much of my waking life, engaged in this shit. And I can't tell if maybe I'm lucky, or I'm just very well habituated into the system.
That makes me think, because like I was really going through this, and like one of my things, like, okay, like I know, like I guess like modernism, postmodernism, and stuff, like they're taking terms and working them in different ways, So like how much of what he's doing is like, it's like all the baggage and bullshit and like associations that come with the idea of work or job or occupation, and what he's doing is switching that, or doing like the futurist thing of breaking it down to its fucking bare things and building up something new, or just fucking destroying it, like, and then bringing in the other idea of play. This is the new thing. It's basically what it was before, left with the old shit. It's been exercised, like all the old bullshit, the baggage, what he calls uselessness is taken away from it, and then that leaves it for this play thing, almost like a weird like purity thing that kind of lets you free roam, where it's like in your choice, so it's not like involuntary. But it's like, it's also like, it's not leisure, and that's one of the things he talks about. Like, it's not just like doing nothing,
right?
Like it's innocent, like it's productive play.
It's creative. Like
he uses
there's a creative aspect to it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think leisure was one of those things that like was really provocative for me in this piece, because he was just like, you remember that part where he was like, there's work and then there's leisure, which is just recovering from work.
Yeah, and he also says,
was like, God damn.
The only thing that's different from work and leisure is that work you get paid.
Yeah, work you get paid for your alienation. I think that's what he says.
So that's really interesting, because like when I read that, I got the picture of like work and leisure like sitting next to each other back to back, and like they, like those two things need each other. Like if one like steps away, the other one falls down. Like they're each other's like back to back structure,
Right.
And that goes into like when he sings like, when you have work, then like you have driving to work, and you have preparing for work, and you have recovering from work, and then you have vacation from work.
Yeah.
And it's all about work. It's all still there. It's in that same realm. So it's like,
and we don't. I think our capacity for, I'm gonna use leisure because that's what he uses, but I think we can like dig into that even more. But before we do, like, I think even our capacity for leisure is atrophied because it's like,
Yeah.
dude, like how much the whole like if you listen to like what people talk about, it's like, oh, like people don't even know how to have hobbies. Like that's something
Yeah.
that people like are always prescribing because like a lot of people's mental health is just so bad. Their ability to have play, to have leisure, to have fun is so atrophied that they need to like practice like mindfulness techniques and like do all this stuff. It's like people don't even know how to like let go or have leisure anymore, which I think is a product of like the sort of the culture that he's outlining here.
Well, I mean, he talks about it's like all the things that we do for leisure. I mean, and we can even see that like now, especially like we've turned out things into leisure, things that are like working and to produce and to like get something from. Like the leisure is not the like the fun and the pleasure of things is not like the purpose of it. It's what the end product is. You know, it's like, oh, like you paint. Oh, what you making from that? You know, like what is that doing for
Right.
you right now? It's like, oh, you studied. What can you do with that? You know, it's
Right.
like how many times am I like I'm reading something and I'm like I just want to fucking enjoy it, but all I can think about is like, am I gonna make this a blog post? Am I gonna make this an essay? How can I use this? How's it
Right.
useful? What's the, like you know? So like in that sense, like when you says like we don't even know how to like do leisure, like how our capacity for leisure is atrophied.
Yeah, dude, like sometimes I'll be like when I do things, there's a part of me that's like very anxious because it's just like, oh, like on the one hand there's like, oh, if I do this hobby or whatever, I want to be good at it. Like I want to be the best. I want to do whatever. Then there's another part where it's just like, oh, if I do this, I don't want to waste time. I want it to be like efficient for something that's not supposed to have any efficacy to it. It's
Yeah.
meant to like like you're just supposed to play this game and fuck around. You're just supposed to watch this movie and let go. You're just supposed to paint. You're not supposed to be good. Like even myself, like I get frustrated when I draw on the like once in a blue moon when I do. Even though I used to love drawing because I'm just like fuck like I don't like I don't like how inefficient I am with it, and also like I don't like the end product of it.
Yeah.
Which maybe that's attributable to like what he's talking about. Maybe that's something more personal, but like I definitely resonated in that sense.
I know one of the books I'm reading now, The Agony of Eros, the dude talks about it like and he's like what we're calling like freedom is bullshit because all we're doing like we're just freely exploiting ourselves, and as much as like I don't
Yeah.
like the sense of the language that he's using, like I get where he's coming from, you know.
Right.
It's like, oh, like yeah, you know, you're independent, but like you're just like you're using yourself as like a how to get to an end for something, you know. It's like oh, like how can I optimize myself to produce all
Right.
the time?
Dude, exactly. Like optimization. I think that's the key word because it's
Yeah.
like that's all anyone fucking talks about. Like
Yeah.
with this stuff, it's like how can I monetize my hobby,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like everything is about like building your portfolio, like your stock, your Robinhood portfolio in some kind of way. Not to be like grandpa who's just like you kids these days or whatever, but
Mhm.
I think there's definitely like I don't know if there was a golden age or people were able to be more leisureful or more mindful, but I think things have definitely gotten worse.
I think we've been struggling to try to remember that forever because even like that's something like Bataille talked about,
Yeah.
you know. Like I think that's why he made every like things that are like taboo or so-called useless. He said like that's the sacred shit, you know, and like the
for sure.
shit that we're trying to like push away is the sacred shit. And I felt that with a few things here, you know. I guess if Bataille like looked at it now, like he would say like we're incomplete, you know, because like it's not pleasure for the sake of pleasure. Like you're using like pleasure for the sake of fucking producing, and
Right.
in the sense of like producing, it's like he speaks here of like basically like work is the cause. He says work is the source of nearly all mystery, you know. And I think what was specific about this is like he doesn't say cause, but he says the source, you know. And that's really specific because like it makes like this, it gives me this strange like root visual. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like he talks about it's like to stop suffering, you have to stop working. Like we have to stop work. You
Yeah.
know, and it's funny because you know Bataille was talking about like civilization, and like we have civilization because like it's about work,
Hmm.
but we work as a way, like we produce as like our reaction to like our fear of death, basically. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
I was exactly gonna bring it there.
yeah. Everything that's useless, like it's not producing,
Hmm.
so that reminds us of death in some type of way. And it's like we work to like to we make things to it's like to stop suffering, but our working is the cause of it. So it also reminds me of like meditation and shit. It's like the more you fight suffering, the more suffering you build.
Right.
Or like the more like suffering there is, like the more you fucking put pressure on something, like the more pressure there is. So
Yeah.
it's funny to think about it. It's like we work to stop suffering, but it's also like that's kind of what makes it. And he, going on, he talks he basically says like work is like the reason for like the most deaths.
Oh
He,
yeah, yeah.
he works it like a little funny, but like you can get what he's saying with it too. It's like
Right. It's like a slow violence.
yeah, and
A
it's like
discreet one.
he was showing like we do fucking everything where it revolves around it. Like how many times
Right.
has like someone been like, oh, you want to go out tonight? It's like, no, I have to sleep for work.
Yeah.
You know?
You don't have the emotional energy to go out because you're so like blasted from work.
Yeah.
You're just so done. Um, but yeah, I feel like when I was reading it, it was making me think of like what a world without progress like would look like, and it's so hard to imagine
Mm-hmm.
because it's so counterintuitive. Because I feel like everything in our culture is built around like this ghost of potential. It's like this like mania for potential and for progress, and it just never ends,
Yeah.
right? Like there's always something else to be done, there's always something to be optimized, there's always something else you can do, and then that's what haunts you, I'd say, at the end of your life, because it's unattainable, right? Because there one day your potential ends. There is no more potential. There's just you and your life that you have
Mm-hmm.
to settle into, and that's like scary as fuck. I think at least for people who are born into a culture that's like obsessed with like the like be all you can be kind of mania, you know?
That was my school's motto.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great, but it's also very pernicious. There's like an insidious aspect to it.
Is
But oh yeah, sorry,
Do
go
you
ahead.
think it's like possible? Because like I read certain things like this, and like I'll think of stuff, and it's like, well, are people able, like, do people have the capacity to like do things for themselves right now, or are we so reliant on certain structure?
Do things for themselves.
Yeah, like, okay, say in his sense, like the idea of work is gone, where it doesn't necessarily mean like there's nothing, but like say there's no work, like, well, can people deal with that, or are we so in, like, because he said like um we've basically been like bred and trained
Mm.
to work.
Yeah, I feel like it's pretty ingrained in our psyches.
Yeah.
Like I feel like it would drive us a little crazy, actually. I feel like a lot of people know that deep down,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of people like we're just like, dude, I just want some free time. Like, I want more time.
Yeah.
And then you get it. Like maybe sometimes in bad ways, like you get fired, but you have that time nonetheless. Even if, I mean, if you're like destitute, then it's a little different. But if you're like, you're not gonna lose your home the next day, you have somewhat of a safety net, then okay, you have more free time, and then you get there and you're like, this is the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
Like you're just in a state of like total disillusionment. Like you don't like it's hard to even do every little thing, or every little activity feels like gargantuan. It like I know for me it's like the more I have to do, sometimes the more able I am, like the more busy I am, the more I'm able to fully engage myself with like an activity or enjoy it more. which is
Mm-hmm.
kind of maybe that's just like a workaholic thing. But I've
No,
definitely found like when I have too much free time, it kind of drives me a little crazy.
I mean, he mentions here, like, this quote, like, he says, like, the fear of freedom,
Right.
you know? And it's like a rationally grounded phobia, you know? So I guess it is, like, what happens when you have complete freedom for things, which I think it's why he has, like, he kind of, like, gives, like, 3 points for transferring things over from, like, work to play, you know, and definitely has to do with definitely shortening how much we fucking work. I think that's the biggest part, you know, like another aspect aside from like creation and stuff. He definitely touches on time in here a lot, you know. There's one phrase that he uses which is like really really fucking cool. The tyranny of the bell is the predecessor
Oh
of
yeah.
the time clock.
That
You know?
part was like super Foucauldian when because he's talking about like these like techniques of control
Mm-hmm.
and like the workplace is the school, is the prison, is the
Yeah, right.
is the medical clinic.
But like that's interesting. The fucking tyranny of the bell. Like we're indoctrinated to the bell from fucking school, from before school. You know what I mean? Like
Right. Yeah.
alarm clocks and just like time. You know, time all the time. You get used to it, and there's no escape. So, but it's interesting to see. It's like, you know, he says abolish work and replace it. You know, so like it's not nothing. And he says like the two ways is like cut down on the amount being done and then transfer the leftover work into the pleasurable, you know, so things that are like game like and craft like pastimes. And like this is interesting because like, you know, the examples that he gives are really fucking funny. You know,
Yeah.
like
Which ones does he give?
there's one specifically that just hit me and I was like, oh, you bastard. And he was like, for kids that like to wallow around in filth, let them clean the toilets. You know, so it's like they're getting what they want, what they desire, but they're also being productive. And then he's like, these aren't exact examples, so use them. But you know, and he's like, the idea of play can help bridge the generational gap, you know, and like looking at like child play as a way to, you know, like see a way to get that back. And that's something because like these guys that like I read, you know, I've mentioned them before. I've always come up like Le Grand Jeu, that little art group, like their interest in like primitivism, they were like, let's look at what kids are doing, you know. And like it's like their main thing was like there is a split that happens between like childhood and adult, and it has to do with like us not having initiation rights, like but like that idea that that split is there, and I guess like not having a way to transfer over like the idea and the joy of play, and then like it becomes a taboo, because it's like not productive. But in this way he's showing how play can be productive, literally in the fuck, like by making this he's showing how play can be productive, which is crazy, you know.
It's interesting you brought that up too, because like something that I would read a lot, usually from like anthropologists or like child psychologists, is they would say the importance of leaving children alone when they engage in play, including and especially when they engage in risky play, because they're the act of like, you know, congregating together, you know, you're gonna do some stupid shit with your friends, and there's like there's some risk and danger involved, but doing that and pushing like that boundary, it's like, oh, how far can I fuck around until something bad happens? Like that's really important for like our own cognitive and emotional development, and you don't get that once, like, you know, this, he doesn't use this phrase, but I think surveillance state is right. There's a state, but I think there's also like a surveillance type of parenting, which I don't think it's immoral in the sense that like people who do it are bad. I think it's just like that type of parenting becomes more easy based on like how society is structured. But
Yeah.
like I think everything is based around like minimizing risk
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
children, right? It's like there's no reason for children to take on any type of risk.
I mean,
Right?
once you get to a certain, like, after you get past childhood, you can't fucking risk anything. It's
Right.
too risky to risk things,
Yeah.
you know?
Right. And it's also the whole thing about play is really it's interesting for from an anthropological perspective. But before going into that, it's interesting because I think what he says, it just makes me think of like how fucking lacking we are, in the sense that, like, okay, I'm reading this book right now. It's called Digital Minimalism,
Okay.
like Cal Newport, and it's about like, you have like a digital declutter, like you have a phase where you take out all types of optional technologies from your life, and then you begin to integrate technologies, you reincorporate them, the ones that after that, like, I guess, cleanse, that you've determined, like, okay, they still add value to my life, but
Okay.
you do it in a very intentional way, like, I'm only going to use these technologies under these strict procedures. And the whole point is to have like an intentional relationship with technology, but also to cultivate like what he calls high quality leisure, because he says like we're super overstimulated all the time, and that it's because we're always engaged in like low quality leisure, like going through your phone, looking at on your Instagram reel, on Facebook, like going through these rabbit hole pipelines on YouTube. It's like you spend hours doing nothing of value, and it's not actual leisure. So it's like, oh, so you need to engage in like high quality leisure. So like refine your hobbies. So like, drawing, woodworking, like, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Um, and it's interesting because it's like there's leisure, which is very instrumental. It's like, I'm gonna engage in this so I can be a better worker. I can be more efficient, or I can be more efficient in the other areas of my life. But people can't even do that because like the fact that you have to write a book about how to do that tells you that we're not even at that point. It's like the leisure that most people engage in is not even leisure. It's like stupefaction, right? It's like it's like, and it's crazy because there's a level of like coercion, not coercion, but like you don't have autonomy anymore, because like you're like, oh, I can't stop scrolling through my phone. I hate this, but I keep doing it. I can't watch. I'm watching movies all day that I don't care about, but I can't stop. Right? Or it's like, or you can be taking drugs or stupefying yourself with any other kind of method. And I feel like a lot of it just comes back to this lack of play. Like pure quality play, both in child and adult life, which is like, there are people who have studied this where they say like, there's been a decrease in play and an increase in mental illness, and that could just be because maybe mental illness is more tracked, or the studies of it more sophisticated now. But I do think that relationship is there is like a causal relationship between the two.
You think it's like we've optimized play and pleasure, and even just thinking like you said, you talking about like the dude's book, and like, and when he says like, after you do the the get rid of like the clutter, or like do the cleanse, then you start bringing things back in. But I'm thinking even that process of refining kind of fucks things up, because then it turns it into like, okay, what's useful,
Right?
how does this work? And one of the things that like Bob Black talks about in here is like this sense of like fucking variety, and he says that the one thing that like sucks about like the occupation and work is that is the one thing you do. That is your thing. So in this sense, it's like a box. It's barriers around you, and there, like, that freedom for like moving and breaking outside of the rules of things, like, it's not there.
Right.
And he says like, he's not saying like don't have rules for things, because play does have rules, but
Right.
the idea of rules in play, because we're not going to say it's a system, right, is that you can play with the rules in play. So you have this variety of being able to change things and move them around and experience other things and do it with other people, So I think when we make things too like I figured out the code and this is how it is. Just like,
Right.
our social media and shit, like it figured out exactly what we like and it's just gonna fucking face feed us that,
Yeah.
like, again, that book Agony of Arrows that I'm reading, like he's like, he talks about like how important it is to just like let things be different,
Right.
and like he gives an example of like how we try to like set up systems around pleasure all the time, and he actually talks about like 50 Shades of Grey, right? Like it's supposed to be this like whole transgressive like BDSM thing, but the motherfucker makes rules for everything, rigid rules for every aspect of the pleasure. There's no longer experience in there. Like it's all you have is limit. There's no going beyond limit
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, this is what the pleasure is going to be. It has been defined. So you're not gonna, like, when you experience something, it's not gonna be a fucking experience because it's already defined.
Right. And I feel like play, at least in like the purest form that I've experienced it with, and I'd say like the other people who've also experienced, like, I think everyone would kind of say that like the like rejuvenating or like the great aspect of play is like how spontaneous it is. It's like there's a level of spontaneity, and there's almost a level of like, not to make it sound like more deep than it is, but like the dissolution of like yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Because it's like you're sort of losing yourself into the moment. You're not thinking about like the uses, how to optimize, how to instrumentalize it. You're not necessarily thinking about the consequences. As you get older and you mature more, you're able to like kind of figure out like, okay, like what forms of play have like really bad consequences that I shouldn't engage in. But there's sort of like a loss of self that I think is like super rejuvenating. That I think that goes back to what you were saying. It's like when you have these rigid set of rules, some of that can be lost. But also, I feel like BDSM is one of those things, because it's with sex. It's like it's hard to talk about. Like it's like sometimes boundaries are a good thing because it like protects people.
Yes.
But yeah.
I don't know, that Agony of Arrows thing. He's like, nah, son, fuck boundaries. You got to have experiences.
Yeah.
No, yeah, it's yeah. I mean, I'm sure we're gonna probably read something from that one day, but like,
I think, but it's also
spontaneity is important.
Yeah, and I think it's also like what kind of relationship you have with someone, because it's like it's a lot easier to play. Like let's like stick with sex, because I feel like sex is like more like it's a little more like fraught territory.
Okay.
But if you're like really close with someone, it's a lot easier to kind of like, you don't have like when people are in like long-term relationships, ideally, like, there is like every day, every act, there's kind of like, oh, like, can I do this, are you okay with this, right? But I mean, there are moments that you have where it's just like, you're like doing your thing and like it's spontaneous, like you're not necessarily being like, oh
yeah,
can I, right? And like you both kind of mutually consent. Of course there can be like exceptions and like moments of miscommunication.
I think that's the part of it though, because
Right.
when he's ragging on like the other book, he's like, okay, at 5 o'clock you do this, at 4 you do this, at 12 you do this, like this, like it's the time by time, like the complete like surveillance, the order of everything. It's overdone, so like you basically become like a fucking automaton,
Right.
And then there's no freedom in that, so.
Right. And that goes back to the thing about like with the kids, it's like, how far can I go in like how far can I sort of like be spontaneous and play until the danger or the risk becomes too much, right? It's like you sort of lose your ability to have experience.
Yeah.
Because you're never willing to sort of lose yourself in these experiences. You're always sort of abiding by these rules or procedures, but sometimes they make sense and they protect you, and then other times I think it can be a little overbearing.
I think it also has to do with the fact, it's like, if the experience or the end of the experience is defined, and that takes away from something,
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like you can engineer experiences. That's what like religion is about, right?
Yeah.
But it's like it's so abstract that like what's gonna happen isn't it's not clearly defined, so that's up to you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like that's with play also, but not necessarily with work, because you know that like if you do like A, B, and C, you're gonna get this product. You know, so
Yeah.
that's exactly what it is. And it's funny. He says something about like production and products, and he's like how work kills people, you know, um, from either like exhaustion or in commute or injuries and all this, you know, like this really odd like slow burn or like result type thing. And he says like we kill people in order to sell products to the survivors.
Yeah.
And that's fucking ridiculous.
Yeah. God.
So we were speaking about it before, like how like our like the atrophy of like leisure, right? Like our ability to engage in like leisure and pleasure and shit. And like what I really liked was he commented on like art, you know, and like take yeah, like take back the things that are like supposed to be pleasure. When we also mentioned like everything that we use is like pleasure or leisure is now like how can that get me something, right? Like he had there's a specific quote, and he's like art would be taken back from the snobs and collectors, abolished as a specialized department catering to an elite audience, and its qualities of beauty and creation restored to integral life from which they were stolen by work. You know?
Boom.
Right? Like how fucking like good is that? Especially like now, like how many people call themselves like creatives or like content creators instead of artists? Like
Yeah,
what the fuck are you
I never
doing?
thought of that, actually.
You know? Like,
Yeah.
it's really interesting because like there's something you're now it's work. That's work if you're a content creator. Like it's not about the experience, it's not about the transformation. Even so many of the artists in the early 19th century, like if you want to go from like Matisse or Van Gogh or all these people that we look at, right? Like they were talking about like themselves being fucking transformed in the work that they were doing, and then like that transformation is embedded in the work, and that's going to transform someone else. This work was it's purely mystical artwork.
Right.
But then what if the transformation part and the part of the artist isn't important anymore, and it's just what you get out of it at the end and what that can make you, so you can like I don't know, fucking get a check mark.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. I think it's interesting, like the relationship between productivity and art, because I was actually thinking of this earlier today in a different context, but like you know, with I was watching an anime and I was like, how the fuck did they make this, right?
Yeah.
And so I was looking at all the work that goes into like animating like a manga or something, and it's so much work, like holy shit. Like it's so much work individually as part of like, you know, the whole team, and it's super exploitive, right? Because most of these people, they're like freelancers.
Okay, yeah.
And so they're not, and so their employers, they don't have to like abide by like I guess the conventional labor laws, and they're working like this one dude who was like kind of high up there, I think, in like that animator world. He like dropped dead because and that month he worked 600 hours in a month. Like dude, I calculated it. He had to have worked 20 hours every day. That's fucking insane.
It is.
Yeah. and I think like similar conversations happen with like, you know, the game The Last of Us.
Okay, yeah.
With like Naughty Dog, because like they became, I think, kind of notorious for like really pushing their employees to like near like they were just dropping because they were really fucked up. And I don't have anything profound to say about it, but I feel like it generates this like interesting conversation of like, how do you talk about art, like really beautiful art that has come about from like through really fucked up means, right? Or and maybe is that even the art? Because maybe the pure art is, you know, the ideas that were generated spontaneously by the artist, and then, you know, when it was animated and created as a video game, that's something different. You know, that's less the art and more the, you know, whatever, the content product creation.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's yeah, what you said just made me think of that. It's like how do you talk about something like that where it's like this really fucked up process generated something really beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, like, even with, like, arts are, it's a lot of work, for like
Yeah,
any
for like
type
no
of
pay
thing. Yeah,
or
right.
or recognition.
And you don't even know if you're gonna. I think that's the thing though, because like with artworks, you don't know that you're gonna make something.
Yeah.
Like, you don't know the outcome really. Like, there's nothing guaranteed. Nobody has to give a shit. You know what I mean? Where I think with creating things or like creating content, you're no longer working for like desire, and you're working to cater to something. So it's also kind of like taking, it's like your direction's being dictated by what's going on, like by your market. You know what I mean? So like in that sense, it's like the market itself, or like your niche becomes the boss that's like dictating
Yeah,
your work.
that's super
You know?
profound. Yeah.
So in that sense, then it's not free, really. You know, whereas it's like you're just working and making shit and putting it out there. You know, that's something different, I think. Mm-hmm.
Art is such a weird thing in like a workaholic culture
Yeah.
because I feel like I this is so ubiquitous, and like as an artist yourself, I'm sure like you encounter it all the time, but it's just like artists artists like drive the like engine of history, among
Mm-hmm.
other different types of
Mm-hmm.
people, but like obviously it's really important. But it's almost like a retrospective thing because if you were to tell someone like, oh, I'm a photographer, I'm an artist, I'm blah blah blah, then then it's almost like, it's
You
like a
don't do
joke
anything?
almost. Yeah, it's like, oh, you don't do anything, or like, oh, you don't want to work,
Yeah.
or whatever, right? Even and it doesn't even have to be retrospective. It's like that person could like really admire contemporary artists, like the really famous ones, but someone you personally know, when you say you're an artist, it's like, oh, so they're like a deadbeat, or like
Mm-hmm.
they're like they don't want to do like whatever, and it's just like that's really sad.
Yeah, it is.
Like when you think about it.
But in reality, it's the stuff that they made that, like, when we go back to try to study history, we look exactly for. It's like, oh, we have to know what was going on. Like, we need the pictures, we need the artwork. This is where the pure, like, these are the primary sources. Like, we need this shit. Like,
Right.
it's very funny to
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
So, how do you abolish work? How do you change? Because I know you said whenever you're doing like your study or your essay stuff, and like, your research, and you get to that point, and this pops into your head. How can you change what you're doing from work to play?
I don't know. Like I feel like the prescription part of books, or it's always the part that kind of breaks down for me. It's like, okay, so what do we do, right? And so for I think like some of the things he prescribes, it's like I feel like something like work that he's describing, you can't change that without changing like the entire like infrastructure of society. Because
I mean, he does say that would happen. Like, everything would fall apart.
right, it's not one thing. It's like the end product of like 1,000 different forces. You can't just like go like, oh, I'm gonna switch this work thing, because it's like that won't work, with no pun intended. Like for your individual life or society in general, and it's also super costly. Like it'll cost you to adopt that kind of attitude.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, I feel like that just leads you into the realm of like critique, which it's important because like he talks about hunter gatherers a lot, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the post leftist thing, like, really, I was like, oh, okay, I see what tradition he's coming from. And he cited on page 5, he cites the original affluent society, and I was like, oh, okay, because like, we were talking before about like informal networks,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
and like pipelines of intellectual traditions and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because like this original affluent society, have you read it before?
No, I haven't.
It's like it was this anthropological text or essay that came out in like the 60s, and the crux of the argument, I'll probably butcher it a little bit, but the crux of it is like hunter gatherer peoples, if you were to aggregate their time for work and their time for leisure, they worked like 5 hours a week or something, and the rest of the time they spent on like play, like music, dancing, whatever. And so in that sense, it was very like primitivist, and I think there's a direct tradition with anarcho-primitivism to like the original affluent society, and those like sort of 60s anti-industrial counterculture anthropologists. And yeah, it's just interesting because I think he's drawing on this genre of anthropology and anti-civilizational anarchism that sort of says, like the the historical instances of human societies that have centered play and leisure, it's been like these hunter-gatherer groups, because he cites like other people, other groups in time, but he says it in a way of like, oh, even these people, they didn't have to work as much as us. Like he cites like peasants, or like under the czar and shit like that, but the only group that he really says like, oh, they're emblematic of like what I think society should be like, he's talking about hunter-gatherers, right?
He said that like if we looked at what they did, it would be like indistinguishable from play.
Yeah, and it's interesting. And there's a really interesting debate in that whole thing, because a lot of people they pushed against that essay, and they're like, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Actually, the Unabomber himself, because we mentioned him at the beginning of this episode, like he has an essay where he's like this is bullshit, which is interesting that he took that position. But yeah, that's all to say, like I have no clue like what what the prescription should be. I think like looking towards certain groups of peoples in history, like hunter gatherers, like they can give us insight into like play and leisure, but it's like I have no idea how to incorporate that into everyday life.
It seems less time working.
Yeah,
that's really one of the things he pushes, and then like finding a way to make the work seem more pleasurable, or make it seem like you're doing something, like you're pleasing yourself while also like working with others, or working for others in a sense. Like make it seem like it's not just useless work to produce, and I guess like really interesting with the time thing again, right? And like looking at art, and it's like when you're working on something like with art that you're like really fucking engaged in, something that like takes all of you, like something that you're about to the core of you, right? Time fucking disappears.
Yeah, totally.
But like when it's just working and you don't care, all you do is look at the clock.
Yeah, that's mad true.
So it might really be like that, because he talks about like have to like to be fulfilled like intellectually and physically, so if that can be inserted into the work that we do, or if we can even like change our perspective, so like when we are working on regular old bullshit, we can have this like type of thing in there, like say, I don't know, like for example, like me working at a grocery store, right? Like, aside from the fact that like I realize it's like it's the coolest shit. I'm literally putting things on shelves and making it look pretty.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm also doing some weird business shit, because making things look pretty and attractive makes people want to engage and buy them.
Yeah.
But then also I know that for every person that comes in there and they're pissed off because like it's too crowded, or somebody cut them off, or like they've had a shitty day, or like they have no one at home to talk to, or they think that like me and my image or anyone else might be an asshole, no one understands them, and then I engage with them in like a full open like sense of like love and acceptance that changes their entire fucking world, so it's doing like this weird like 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 I see it as like this service, so like bringing in this idea of like you're doing something more, maybe it's a transcendent connection or transcendent drive, You know, I think that's important,
Yeah.
and that might be a way because it's this like this it it's like a line that leads you to freedom. This weird like escape from the thing, and like that escape from the thing transforms it. You know, like brings it into its next sense, making it playful. You know.
Yeah. You are way more optimistic than I am. I'll say that.
Yeah.
Because I've worked in a few grocery stores,
Yeah.
and it's been pretty bad.
You know,
But I'm also very stubborn.
I understand
So
that.
I'll say that. I feel like that's all people can do, really. It's like change the way they approach something, and not in the sense that that's the most moral thing to do, but it's like, what can you do given your current situation,
Mm-hmm.
aside from like leaving and getting another job. And I'm sure Bob Black would be like, that's totally not the fucking point of this essay, you asshole. But it's like, in most people's situations, I think either one of those options is the most viable.
I mean, like it reminds me of like Michelle Reese and like what Bataille, then we're doing with the College of Sociology, and like the idea of trying to bring the sacred back into like fucking modern world where like we've lost that sense of the sacred, you know. And like you saw like in the Reese reading, like he was looking at like just normal moments in his life that stuck out, and then turning them into these weird sacred things, and like putting all this beautiful myth and mystique, and like and upscaling his memories, you know, where it's like, so maybe for work he is like we can see it in that same sense, like it's work, but we're gonna like work is the profane and sacred is play is the sacred, and we're gonna bring that aspect of the sacred play into work, that thing that we lost when we became whatever the fuck it is we became now, you know. And bring that sense of connection. What it really does seem like is this desire for connection to the past or something beyond us, you know, that makes us feel like we're continuous, and like we're not just gonna fucking end, and having that in all that we do, like there's more of a drive than it's just like useless production. I think that's I think it's a transformation of like perspective.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Like, damn, this is making me want to go back to Trader Joe's.
Go back to Trader Joe's. No.
Okay, wait. So what did we end on just now?
How we could actually like how this can be utilized, you know?
Yeah.
How can we like make work more playful?
Yeah. I don't know, man. But that's why I am in the profession of academia. We don't traffic in solutions. That's not part of the industry. We just
bring up fucking problems.
Yeah, we just create more problems and make critiques and critique others, and then when they try to generate a solution, we're like, "Fuck you. What about this?" Yeah, I'm not in the business of getting things done.
Got you. So, all right, you'll bring up the things, and I'll make artworks that can serve as a purpose but make no absolute sense.
Yeah.
Excellent. Fuck. All right, I like this one. This is an interesting reading. I'm very, very interested in like other stuff this dude's written. I hope it doesn't suck.
Yeah, no, it's good. I think that for the next one, maybe like surrealism.
You want to try some surrealism?
I think something, because you know more about that world than I do. So like something that kind of encapsulates like in the spirit of this, so we can kind of understand the context that he's drawing on, but also just for like my own education, because I like hear about these things like surrealism and futurism, but I only have like a vague impression of them.
Okay.
But they're super influential.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'd be cool to like dig a little deeper into those.
Historically wise, futurism happens first. Would you want to? Futurism might be fucking crazy.
Yeah.
But we can do it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Futurism or surrealism probably be next, I think.
Yeah. All right. Sick.
Read one of the manifestos.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right, this is a good one. Yeah.
Peace.
Peace.